Joining me now is Natasha Hausdorff, a barrister with expertise in international law. She also volunteers as legal director of UK Lawyers for Israel. A very good afternoon to you, Natasha Hausdorff. Your reaction, firstly, to this preliminary ruling from the ICJ?
Well, thank you. I think it's important to correct the record on much of the reporting and clarify that the court has not made any findings, nor has it directed Israel to alter its conduct in any way. The court is not in a position to assess the manner in which Israel is conducting the war against Hamas. And the provisional measures are essentially that Israel comply with the Genocide Convention. There is certainly no finding that it has not done so thus far. And importantly, paragraph 54 of the court's order makes it crystal clear that the only finding or the only issue the court has addressed in terms of plausibility is whether the rights claimed by South Africa fall under the convention. But it has not addressed the plausibility of whether there has been any breach of convention rights. And by all accounts, if we look at the figures, the success that Israel is having in targeting Hamas and avoiding civilians appears to be unparalleled. I was extremely surprised to hear your previous contribution.
What figures are you referring to, Natasha? Because whenever I've interviewed senior members of the IDF and I ask for that breakdown, they don't provide it.
Well, the figures that the IDF has been able to provide are that over 9,000 terrorists have been killed. Even if we were to take the 25,000 figure, which is unverified and which, of course, has to be attributed to Hamas propaganda and does not account for those Palestinians that have been killed by Hamas directly, by them shooting or bombing them, or indirectly because of Palestinian rockets fired from Gaza, falling short within the Gaza Strip. But even if we were to take that figure as given, we would be looking at a civilian to combatant ratio of at the most 1.8 to 1, compared to global figures put out by the United Nations of 9 to 1, a disturbing 9 civilians killed for every combatant, or the figures put out by the United States of between 3 to 1 and 5 to 1 in Iraq and Afghanistan, 1.8 to 1, as I say, even on the basis of those wildly inflated Hamas figures, is unquestionably unparalleled.
Well, it is at odds with every aid agency senior official that I've spoken to who says that it is a humanitarian disaster, and 1.8 to 1 is still a ratio that many people would say is unacceptable. We can't forget, though,
I would certainly agree.
Out of the 17 justices, 15 supported not throwing out this case and the plausibility of a genocide charge. Including 2 counts were supported by a former Israeli Supreme Court justice, himself a Holocaust survivor. Those were to prevent any more inflammatory language coming from senior government or military officials, and also to support the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Well, the provisional measures which the court has passed, as I explained, simply repeat the requirements for the most part under the Genocide Convention. So in that case, and this was set out actually in stark terms by the dissenting Ugandan judge, the court hasn't added to in any substantial respect. I think there is, however, understandable anxiety that the ICJ is playing into the hands of terrorist organizations, and it's irreparably damaging its
What is the
reputation.
evidence for that, Natasha?
Well, the fact that it is quoting Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization, and the figures that they put out, as do, unfortunately, the humanitarians that you indicated you've interviewed. And let's be clear, this is a genocidal organization practicing real genocide on the 7th of October, and vowing to repeat those genocidal acts over and over, is continuing to hold and torture Israeli hostages and to fire rockets at Israeli civilians, even after the court hearing yesterday. So the fact that the court is quoting those figures and that terrorists, in fact, are celebrating the outcome of the hearing yesterday should tell us a great deal. But there are also a few specific aspects in which the approach of the court yesterday has also been deeply concerning. For example, So far as the figures are concerned, I think I've already debunked the Hamas Ministry of Health figures that have been put out. But we also saw the court quoting Philip Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA. You were talking earlier about the US's decision, followed now by Canada also, to defund or at least to suspend the funds of UNRWA because of the reports that employees were involved in the 7th of October attacks. And there are also reports of UNRWA teachers having held a hostage, an Israeli hostage in the Gaza Strip. So the fact that these are the unfounded and biased reports that the court is relying upon really does send a very troubling message.
Well, the court came back very quickly, though, didn't it? And my last guest suggested that that must be because the court thought there was very strong evidence that Israel needed to change the way it was prosecuting its military strategy to protect civilians.
That is an entire misrepresentation of the judgment that we heard delivered yesterday, and I would encourage people to read it. It's not particularly wrong. The court was clear that it only considered the claims that were advanced and whether they could feasibly fall under the Genocide Convention. But it also, unfortunately, the court entirely ignored Hamas's conduct in Gaza, the fact that it uses civilians as human shields, civilian buildings, homes, schools, mosques and hospitals as terror infrastructure. And unfortunately, and this is another factor in terms of why the court is turning itself into, to say a laughingstock is perhaps a little bit stretched at the moment, but certainly the reputation of the court is unfortunately being dealt a severe blow. There was zero discussion, Samantha, of Israel's rights under the Genocide Convention, nay, its obligations to ensure the prevention and the punishment of genocide, that which was committed on the 7th of October and which Hamas threatens to repeat. And in that context, unfortunately, I think that the United States, the UK, Germany have been proved right. And
Natasha, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are out of time. Sorry to cut you off mid-flow there. Natasha Hausdorff, thank you for talking to us.